The silence of this house, it is not an absence of sound. It is a solid presence, a mass of rotting velvet that presses against my eardrums until the rhythm of my own blood becomes a deafening drum. Rhythmic, relentless. I was hired to be his cure, but the air here tastes of bitter medicine and marble dust. He received me in the atrium, Caelum. The name floats in my mind like a lily petal in a pool of pitch. When he smiled, the candlelight seemed to bend toward him, a physical adoration of photons for that porcelain skin. It has not a single flaw, not a single pore, not a single mark of humanity. He is too perfect, and perfection is a form of violence. Do you understand what you must do, Isadora? His voice was a whisper of silk, coiling around my neck. I said yes. I lied. Now I am in the hallway of the second floor. The wallpaper is a blue so deep it borders on morning, with vine patterns that seem to writhe the moment I look away. I walk. My feet make no sound on the thick carpet. The corridor seems to have stretched. I remember counting 10 doors to my room, but I've already passed 15. Or perhaps it is the same 3 doors, repeating in a vicious cycle of dark wood and brass handles that shine like feverish eyes. A sound. Tick, tick, tick. It isn't a clock. It is the sound of something hard tapping against glass. A finger? A claw? A splinter of bone? The sound comes from inside the walls, or perhaps from inside my own skull. I stop. The sound stops. The silence crushes me again, but now it brings a scent. The sickly, sweet odor of flowers rotting on an altar. The lamp at the end of the hall flickers. It doesn't blink. It dims, as if the light is being sucked out of the bulb by something hungry. The shadows grow long, stretching black fingers to touch the tips of my shoes. The temperature has dropped. I see my breath. A pale mist dissipating against the face of a stone cherub carved into the ceiling. He told me I should not use mirrors. He said vanity is the first crack in the soul. But I miss my face. I feel that, without a reflection, I am being erased, atom by atom, replaced by his will. Another sound. A wet, dragging slide. It comes from the east wing, the forbidden wing, the wing where the angel retreats when the moon reaches its zenith. I should go back. I should lock myself away. But my fingers touch the wood of the ajar door. The air bleeding from that room is cold, heavy with a whisper that uses no words, only intentions. I look at the floor, and for a second, perspective fails. The floor feels like a ceiling, the ceiling an abyss. Dizziness hits me like a physical blow. Caelum is standing at the far end of the opposite corridor. He hasn't moved. He hasn't made a sound. He simply is. His silhouette is bathed in a supernatural golden light, making him look like a saint from a forgotten cathedral. But the shadows he casts on the wall, the shadows have too many shapes. They have limbs he does not possess. They churn with a silent fury while he remains motionless, extending a pale hand toward me. Isadora, he says, and the sound does not come from his mouth, but from every corner of the house at once. Are you looking for yourself? Or for me? I recoil. My heart is a bird trapped in a cage of ribs. I feel that if I take one more step in that direction, the architecture of this house will close over me, like a jaw. I enter my room and lock the door. But as I press my forehead against the cold wood, I hear a soft sigh coming from under my bed. The night is only beginning. And I no longer know if the hand that locked the door was mine. The sigh under the bed was not a sound. It was a displacement of air, carrying the scent of incense and iron. I didn't look. If I didn't look, The monster beneath the frame was only an idea. And ideas, I still believed I could control. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the velvet armchair, my nails digging into the wooden arms until my fingertips turned purple. The morning did not bring the sun. It brought only a gray, thick fog that clung to the window panes like the breath of a giant. I went down for breakfast. The dining room table seemed miles long. At one end, Caelum was slicing fruit with surgical precision. He wore white linen, immaculate, reflecting the pale morning light in a way that hurt the eyes. "You look exhausted, Isadora," he said without looking up. The knife glided through the fruit without a sound. The walls of this house often speak to those who do not know how to hear the silence. "I heard something in my room," my voice came out dry, a piece of sandpaper dragging across my throat. He stopped moving. The world stopped with him. The dust motes suspended in the air froze mid-flight. Caelum looked up. Those eyes, irises of a blue so pale they seemed made of thin ice covering a chasm. "What you heard was your own resistance. You fight against the peace the sanctuary offers." He stood up. The movement was fluid, devoid of the inertia that anchors human beings to the earth. He walked toward me. With every step, the space between us seemed to shrink unnaturally. Suddenly, he was behind my chair. I felt the heat of his breath on my neck, but his skin, when his fingers touched my shoulders, was cold, like a garden statue. "Come. Today's work requires you to see what we hide beneath the beauty." He led me not to the frescoes, but to the basement. The stairs were damp stone, spiraling down like the throat of a beast. There were no lamps, only niches in the wall, with candles that lit themselves as we passed. The distortion began there. The steps seemed to multiply. I was descending, yet the sensation was that we were climbing. The pressure in my ears increased until I tasted the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. We reached a circular chamber. In the center, a marble tub carved with figures of weeping angels. The water inside did not reflect the ceiling. It reflected a night sky that did not exist. "Clean it," he whispered, handing me a silk sponge. "Purity requires constant maintenance. Ugliness is an infection that tries to devour us." I knelt. I began to scrub the marble. But the water began to change. It rose over the edges, not like a liquid, but like liquid hands reaching for my wrists. I looked to my side, and Caelum was no longer there. In his place stood a tall shadow, a stain of absolute darkness that kept the shape of his beauty, but whose face was a hungry vacuum, panic, frigid and sharp. I tried to stand, but the stone floor now felt soft, like flesh. My feet were sinking. The sound, tick, 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 returned, now coming from inside the tub. "Caelum!" I screamed. My cry did not echo. It was swallowed by the porous walls. "I am here, Isadora. I will always be wherever you look." I looked at my hands. They were no longer mine. In that sickly light, my skin seemed to be turning translucent, revealing not veins and bones, but letters, contracts, secrets I didn't remember writing. Caelum's hand, the real hand of flesh and porcelain, appeared before my eyes, offering help. I grabbed it with the desperation of a drowning soul. He pulled me close, his face millimeters from mine. For an unspeakable second, the angel mask wavered. I saw something behind his pupils, an infinite expanse of desert and bones. "You're beginning to see, aren't you?" He smiled, and the sound of his voice was like breaking glass. "The world outside is a faded lie. Here, in my darkness, you will finally have a shape." He kissed my forehead. It was the most terrifying touch of my life, because, for a sickening, fleeting moment. I wished he would never let me go. The horror was not what he was. The horror was what he was making me become. Time in this house does not move. It rots. The days have become an amorphous mass of gray and gold. I no longer know if I've been here for a week or a century. My nails are worn down from scratching at the door frames, searching for an exit. The walls insist on hiding. The house is a living organism, and I am the foreign body it is slowly digesting. Caelum now demands rituals. Every afternoon, I must comb his hair in front of the place where a mirror should be. I see the movement of my arm in the void. I feel the texture of silk between my fingers. But when I look at the space where his reflection should be, I see only the wallpaper writhing in obscene shapes. "You are growing pale, my dear Isadora," he murmured today. His voice vibrated inside my chest, a sound that does not travel through the air. "You are becoming diaphanous, almost divine." I want to leave. My voice was a thread of sound, a stitch about to break. He laughed. The sound was like silver coins rattling in a tomb. "Go then. The door was never locked." I ran. I ran until my lungs burned with the cold, thick oxygen. I crossed the atrium, the stone cherubs turning their heads to watch me pass. I reached the massive oak front door and flung it open. What I saw was not the world. Behind the door, there was no road, no forest, no sky. There was only an abyss of white mist, an absolute nothingness that pulsed with the sound of 1,000 overlapping whispers. I took one step out and felt that there was no floor. The void tried to consume me, pulling the substance of my soul out through my pores. I recoiled, slamming the door and falling to my knees, sobbing air that felt like crushed glass. "There is nothing outside of me, Isadora." Caelum's voice came from above. I looked at the staircase. He was floating. Or perhaps gravity was simply bending to his will. He descended, his feet barely touching the steps. He approached, and this time, I did not pull away. I couldn't. Fear had become a form of gravity. He held my face with both hands. They were warm now, terribly warm. "The world you knew was an illusion of cheap colors and useless pains. Here, pain has a purpose. Here, I am your horizon." The psychological horror reached its peak when he led me to the great fresco I was supposed to restore. The painting, once a blurred biblical scene, was now sharp. In the center, a woman who had exactly my face. She was being woven into a carpet by invisible hands. Her legs were already threads of wool. Her torso was dried paint. "The past is an anchor, Isadora. Let me cut it." He took me to the east wing. The forbidden door opened without a creak. The smell of old blood and jasmine was intoxicating. Inside, there were no nightmare monsters, but something worse. Hundreds of small crystal vials on silver shelves. Each one contained a pulsing light, small and flickering. "Are they memories?" I asked, my mind beginning to fracture. "They are the versions of them that I loved," he replied, caressing one of the vials. "And now I need yours, so that you can be perfect, so that we can be one." The ceiling of the room began to lower. Or perhaps I was growing. Perspective dissolved into a kaleidoscope of aesthetic pain. I felt an unbearable pressure at the base of my skull, as if a golden needle were searching for the thread of my identity, to pull it out. "It doesn't hurt, my little restorer. Only what is human hurts, and we are almost finished with that." I closed my eyes, and the last sound I heard, before the final darkness of the chapter, was the sound of glass shattering. It was my name. He had broken my name. There are no more heartbeats. What I hear now is the sound of oil drying on the canvas. the imperceptible crackle of paint expanding and contracting under the gaze of God. And God, in this house, has the face of Caelum. I woke up standing. My feet do not touch the floor, they are fused to it. When I try to move my arms, I feel the resistance of 1,000 brush bristles piercing my dermis. I am no longer Isadora. Isadora was a badly drawn sketch, a succession of biological errors and futile memories that were erased by the benevolent hand of my master. The light in the restoration room is an unbearable gold, a clarity that does not reveal the truth, but blinds you to everything else. Caelum is standing in front of me. He holds a palette of colors made from substances I dare not name: the crimson of a final breath, the blue of a forgotten dream, the white of a bone that has never seen the sun. "Look at me, my miracle," he whispers. I look, but I do not use eyes. I use the perception of a color that feels itself being watched. He brings the brush close to my face. I feel the fine tip touch my cheek, and, where the bristle passes, the sensation is a caress that tears the soul open and sews it back together. Tighter, firmer, more his. "Do you feel the weight of perfection?" he asks, and his face begins to melt. The angel mask, that porcelain skin that lured me into this abyss, begins to drip like hot wax. Beneath it, there is no flesh, no skull. There is only a geometric vacuum, an architecture of shadows that expands until it occupies my entire field of vision. The monster did not have the face of an angel. The angel was the monster, an aesthetic trap for a soul hungry for beauty. I try to scream, but my throat is a tube of dry pigment. The scream comes out as a dark stain in the air, a dissonant note that he quickly wipes away with a silk cloth. "Silence, Isadora. Art does not complain about its form." He gives the final touch, a dot of white light in the center of my static pupil. The moment the brush pulls away, Isadora's consciousness becomes a tiny flame trapped in a marble palace. I can see everything, but I can feel nothing, except absolute adoration for the one who created me. Perspective distorts one last time. I am no longer in the center of the room. I am fixed to the wall, framed in heavy, cold gold. Caelum walks to the door. He has recovered his divine face, his cherubic glow. He puts on his coat, adjusts his lace cuffs, and blows out the candles. The room plunges into a bluish twilight, except for me. I glow. I am the only real thing in the sanctuary of lies. "The next contract will be signed tomorrow," he says to the emptiness, his voice echoing like a verdict. "She will have green eyes. Perhaps they will match your background, my dear." I hear the sound of the key turning in the lock. The tick, tick, tick is now the sound of my own thoughts, beating against the edges of the frame, trying to find an exit that does not exist. The house is silent. The silence is not an absence of sound. It is the sound of my eternity. I am beautiful. I am eternal. I am nothing. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the shadows, subscribe to Velvet Vices for more forbidden stories. Don't let the fire fade out.